At 5:17 local time, the Gulf of Aden was still dark enough to hide a mistake. On the starboard bridge wing of a U.S. Navy destroyer, the morning watch had settled into that quiet rhythm sailors know well. Engines hummed somewhere deep below. Radar swept above. Black water rolled endlessly beneath the hull. Then the surface search radar picked up 3 contacts, small, fast, closing. Inside the Combat Information Center, a sailor leaned closer to his screen. Bridge, CIC, new surface contacts, bearing 086, 3 small craft, range 12 nautical miles, speed increasing. On the bridge, nobody rushed. That was the first rule. Panic wastes time. The officer of the deck lifted his binoculars toward the darkness. There was nothing to see yet, only the faint gray edge of dawn and a horizon pretending to be empty. CIC, bridge, confirm course. Contacts are turning toward us, CPA decreasing. Closest point of approach. That phrase makes every sailor listen harder. A fishing boat drifts. A merchant vessel broadcasts. A confused civilian answers the radio. These contacts did none of that. No AIS signal, no clear flag, no navigation lights that made sense. And now they were speeding up. At 5:18, the destroyer's radar tracked the 3 boats pushing through the chop in a loose fan shape. 1 in the center, 2 offset behind it. Not random, not casual, not the way fishermen move when they are trying to get home. The officer of the deck gave the order. Hail them. A calm voice went out over bridge-to-bridge radio. Unidentified small craft, this is a United States Navy warship operating in international waters. You are approaching at high speed. Alter course immediately. Only static came back. The 3 boats kept coming. At 5:19, the range dropped below 9 nautical miles. Their wakes began to show on the electro-optical camera feed, 3 white scars cutting through the dark water. The center craft was leading by several hundred yards, bouncing hard over the swells, bow high, engines pushing. On the bridge, the captain arrived without asking what was happening. He had already heard enough over the ship's internal speakers. Report! 3 small craft. No response to hails. Closing from the east. Speed now 31 knots. The captain looked at the tactical display. His expression did not change. Maintain course. Log everything. Second hail. The warning went out again, slower and sharper. Unidentified vessels, you are standing into risk. Turn away now. Still nothing. At 5:20, lookouts on the starboard side finally made visual contact. 3 dark shapes, low against the water, rising and disappearing between waves. They were not large enough to challenge a destroyer in the traditional sense. No heavy equipment, no armored hull. Nothing that looked impressive from a distance. But small boats do not need to be impressive to create risk. They need speed. They need surprise. And they need people bold enough to believe a billion-dollar Navy ship might hesitate. Inside CIC, the watch team built the picture piece by piece. Bearing, speed, spacing, formation. Every second added another data point, and every data point pointed in the same direction. This was not ordinary traffic. The center boat shifted slightly north, angling toward the destroyer's starboard bow. The 2 trailing boats widened out as if trying to divide the ship's attention. That got noticed immediately. Bridge, CIC. Contacts are maneuvering. Center craft appears to be lead. Outer contacts opening lateral separation. The captain answered without delay. Set security posture. Man key stations. No escalation without command authorization. Across the ship, the atmosphere changed. Sailors moved quickly but not wildly. Boots hit steel. Watertight doors opened and shut. Security teams headed for assigned positions. Lookouts locked onto the incoming boats. Cameras zoomed in. Radios tightened. On the starboard side, defensive teams took position. Hands ready. Equipment lowered. That mattered. The U.S. Navy does not win these moments by being the loudest force on the water. It wins by being the calmest. At 5:21, the range was 7 nautical miles. A lookout called down from the bridge wing. Possible personnel visible on lead craft. Multiple individuals forward. The camera feed sharpened. Figures could be seen moving on the lead boat, packed near the bow and cabin. One man appeared to be standing, bracing himself with one hand while holding something long in the other. Too far to identify, too close to ignore. The captain studied the feed for half a second. Keep recording. That was it. No speech, no drama, just 2 words. Because out here, video can matter almost as much as force. Every ignored warning, every course change, every second of approach would become evidence. At 5:22, the destroyer issued a 3rd warning over radio and loudspeaker. Small craft approaching U.S. Navy warship. Turn away immediately. Do not continue your approach. The lead boat did not turn. It accelerated. 33 knots. 34, 35. The bow slapped hard against the water, throwing spray over the men inside. The two outer boats held formation, now clearly offset, closing like jaws around the destroyer's forward quarter. On the bridge, the officer of the deck looked to the captain. Range 5 nautical miles. The captain did not raise his voice. Bring the helicopter crew to alert status. Below and aft, the flight deck began to wake up. At 5:23, the morning horizon had turned grey enough to reveal everything. 3 fast skiffs, no flag, no answer, coming straight toward a U.S. Navy destroyer. And inside the ship, every screen, every camera, every defensive station, and every trained sailor was now focused on the same thing. The boat still had time to turn away. They did not. That was the moment the bridge stopped treating this as suspicious traffic and started treating it as a possible hostile approach. At 5:24 local time, the destroyer's calm did not disappear. It hardened. Across the ship, the internal announcing system carried the order in a flat, controlled voice. Security alert! Security alert! Men all required stations. No one needed the sentence repeated. On the starboard side, sailors moved into position behind defensive mounts. The barrels stayed low, fingers stayed straight, eyes stayed locked on the water. That was the difference between panic and procedure. 5 nautical miles out, the 3 skiffs were still charging ahead. The lead boat held the center line, bow hammering through the chop, spray flying over the men crowded behind the windshield. The 2 trailing boats widened farther, one sliding north, the other dropping south, building a loose triangle around the destroyer's projected path. Inside CIC, the tactical picture sharpened. Bridge, CIC, lead craft speed 35 knots. Outer contacts maintaining 30 knots. CPA still decreasing. The captain stood behind the officer of the deck, watching the display. Any response to hails? Negative. Try again. Bridge to bridge and loudspeaker. The 4th warning went out. Unidentified small craft. This is a United States Navy warship. You are approaching a protected military vessel. Alter course immediately. A second later, the same warning rolled across the water through the ship's loudspeaker system, deep and unmistakable. The boats kept coming. At 5:25, the electro-optical camera zoomed tighter on the lead skiff. The image shook with the sea state, then stabilized. 4 men were visible in the forward section. 2 more were near the stern. One appeared to be crouching beside a pile of equipment under a tarp. The sensor operator adjusted focus. Possible ladder, possible fuel cans, unknown long object forward. Those words landed heavily inside CIC. A ladder meant boarding. Fuel cans meant range. The unknown object meant nobody got to relax. The captain's response was immediate. Do not assume the worst. Do not assume harmless. Continue recording. That was the balance every sailor understood. A wrong assumption in either direction could turn a tense morning into something far worse. Treat them too lightly, and a skiff could reach the hull. React too aggressively, and a warning encounter could become a global headline before sunrise. At 5:26, the destroyer activated additional non-lethal measures. Searchlights snapped on, slicing white beams across the water. The lead skiff lit up in harsh detail. Black hull, overloaded stern, men shielding their eyes from the glare. For a moment, the boat wavered. Then it corrected and kept coming. On the bridge, a junior officer muttered almost under his breath, "They're really doing this." The captain heard it. "They're being recorded doing this." That was all he said. The ship's long-range cameras tracked every movement. Timestamps burned into the feed, GPS coordinates locked to each frame, warnings logged, distances logged, course changes logged. The Navy was not only protecting a ship, it was building the official memory of the encounter, second by second. At 5:27, the southern skiff suddenly cut across a wave and angled inward. Outer contact changing course, CIC reported. South boat turning toward our beam. The formation was no longer simply closing, it was shaping. Raiders do not rush a military vessel because they expect a fair contest. They do it because they expect confusion, hesitation, and blind spots. They rush the hull, force the crew to track too many moving pieces, then look for one weak moment. Unfortunately for them, they had chosen a ship designed to track aircraft, drones, submarines, missiles, and surface contacts all at once. 3 skiffs were not confusion. 3 skiffs were a bad decision unfolding in real time. At 5:28, the defensive teams received permission to show presence. The .50 caliber mounts shifted slightly. Not used, not pointed directly into the boats, just moved enough to be seen. That message needed no translation. Turn away. The lead skiff still refused. The destroyer's whistle sounded next, a deep blast that rolled across the water and hit the small boats like a physical force. The men on the lead craft looked up. One turned toward the others. Another pointed at the ship. Still no radio response. Inside CIC, the watch supervisor called out the new range. Lead contact 3.2 nautical miles. Time to closest approach under 4 minutes. 4 minutes is a long time in a movie. At sea, 4 minutes is almost nothing. It is one bad turn, one missed order, one person lifting the wrong object at the wrong time. On the flight deck, the MH-60R Seahawk crew was already moving. Rotor blades were still tied down, but not for long. A pilot climbed aboard. The sensor operator checked the camera system. A deck crewman crouched near the tie-downs, waiting for the signal. The helicopter was not being prepared to start a confrontation. It was being prepared to stop one before it reached the ship. At 5:29, the loudspeaker warning went out again. Small craft, you are approaching a U.S. Navy warship. Turn away immediately or defensive measures will be taken. This time, the northern skiff slowed slightly. The lead skiff did not. It surged ahead, cutting across the destroyer's starboard bow line, now close enough that the men aboard could see the gray wall of American steel rising above the waves. Maybe they thought the destroyer would hesitate. Maybe they thought the crew would be afraid to act. Maybe they had spent too many years chasing merchant ships that had fewer options. But this was not a merchant ship. At 5:30, the lead skiff crossed inside 2.9 nautical miles. The bridge went quiet. CIC called it out. Lead contact continuing inbound. Hostile intent cannot be ruled out. The captain looked toward the flight deck camera, then back to the tactical display. Launch the Seahawk. Outside, the first rotor blade began to turn. The skiff still had a final chance to break off. They chose speed instead. At 5:31 local time, the Seahawk lifted from the destroyer's flight deck like a warning with rotor blades. Downwash blasted across the stern, flattening spray into white mist as the MH-60R climbed into the gray morning air. Deck crew dropped low, one arm over their helmets, the other signaling clear. The helicopter banked starboard, nose dipping toward the incoming boats. Inside the cockpit, the pilot did not need to ask what the mission was. Everyone already knew. Get eyes on the skiffs. Confirm intent. Apply pressure. Do not escalate unless they force the moment. Below, the destroyer held steady on course. No sharp turn, no dramatic maneuver. Just controlled speed, controlled posture, controlled power. The kind of calm that only looks simple from a distance. Inside CIC, the Seahawk's video feed appeared on the main display. The image flickered once, stabilized, then zoomed toward the lead skiff. 3 boats still inbound. The lead craft was now inside 2.6 nautical miles, throwing spray off both sides as it slammed through the chop. The 2 outer boats were falling slightly behind, but they still held enough angle to create a problem. That was the point. 1 skiff is a single track. 3 skiffs are a decision tree. And raiders love decision trees because they create hesitation. The U.S. Navy trains to remove hesitation. Seahawk, CIC, you are cleared to establish overwatch. Maintain safe separation. Record all contacts. Copy. Establishing overwatch. At 5:32, the helicopter crossed ahead of the destroyer's starboard quarter and dropped lower, holding several hundred feet above the water. Its sensor ball rotated beneath the nose, locking onto the center boat. Infrared showed 6 heat signatures aboard, maybe 7. One was crouched low near the stern. Another was pressed against the forward rail. The sensor operator adjusted the image. Lead craft has multiple personnel forward. Possible boarding ladder visible. Possible long object starboard side. On the bridge, the captain listened without moving. Keep it classified as unknown. Continue warnings. The helicopter transmitted on open radio. Small craft approaching U.S. Navy warship. This is U.S. Navy aircraft. Alter course immediately. You are creating an unsafe situation. No answer. Only engine noise, rotor noise, and bad choices closing distance. At 5:33, the Seahawk shifted to the lead skiff's port side, flying a wide, deliberate arc. Not close enough to be reckless. Close enough to be understood. The men looked up. One shielded his face. Another pointed at the helicopter, then back toward the destroyer. That told the crew something important. They were not confused. They knew exactly what was above them. They kept going anyway. The Seahawk repeated the warning. Turn away now. Do not continue approach. Still nothing. Inside CIC, the lead skiff's course line continued crawling toward the destroyer's starboard bow. Range 2.1 nautical miles. The northern skiff slowed again, dropping behind the formation. The southern skiff held speed but widened out, forcing the destroyer's lookouts and cameras to divide attention. A petty officer at the surface console called it out. Outer contacts separating. Lead craft remains primary, the captain answered. Maintain tracking on all 3. That was the Navy's advantage. The skiffs were trying to create too many moving pieces. The destroyer had systems for that. Radar held the geometry. Cameras held the evidence. Lookouts held visual contact. The helicopter held the high ground. the crew held discipline. At 5:34, the Seahawk's sensor operator zoomed tighter. The tarp near the stern had shifted. Under it, the camera caught plastic containers, rope, and what looked like a metal hook or ladder section. Not proof of anything by itself, but combined with speed, formation, silence, and a direct approach, it tightened every jaw in the room. Bridge, CIC. Recommend final warning if lead craft crosses 2 nautical miles. The captain nodded once. Approved. The destroyer's loudspeaker thundered across the water. Small craft, this is your final warning. Turn away immediately. The Seahawk echoed the same message from above. For the first time, the lead boat wavered. Its bow shifted 3 degrees right, then corrected left. Still inbound. At 5:35, the helicopter made its most deliberate move yet. It crossed ahead of the lead skiff at a safe offset, banking hard enough for the men below to see the U.S. Navy markings on the fuselage. Rotor wash rippled the water in front of them. The message was clear. We see you, we can reach you, and you are running out of ocean. The lead skiff's driver looked up, then leaned forward over the controls. Instead of turning away, he pushed harder. The engines screamed. Range, 1.8 nautical miles. On the destroyer's starboard side, the defensive teams were fully locked in. Equipment remained controlled. No one acted on their own. Every sailor waited for the command everyone hoped would never come. Inside the Seahawk, the pilot watched the lead skiff surge. Lead craft increasing speed, CIC confirmed it 2 seconds later. Lead contact now 36 knots, continuing inbound. That changed the air inside the ship, not loudly, not visibly, but everyone felt it. At this range, nobody was guessing anymore. This was not strange traffic. It was not lost fishermen. It was not a misunderstanding caused by language, weather, or poor navigation. It was a high-speed approach toward a U.S. Navy warship after repeated warnings from sea and air. At 5:36, the lead skiff crossed 1.6 nautical miles. The Seahawk held its orbit above and behind. The destroyer held course. The skiffs held speed. And the entire encounter narrowed into one brutal question. Would they turn before the Navy was forced to stop them? Because at that range, this was no longer harassment. It was a countdown. At 5:37 local time, the lead skiff crossed the line every sailor on that destroyer had been watching. 1.5 nautical miles. Still inbound, still fast, still silent. On the bridge, the captain's eyes stayed fixed on the tactical display. The screen did not care about courage, fear, politics, or excuses. It only showed geometry, a small boat at high speed, a closing angle toward the starboard bow, a U.S. Navy destroyer with seconds left to solve the problem. Bridge, CIC. Lead contact maintaining 36 knots. CPA under 500 yards if no course change. 500 yards may sound like distance. Against a ship this size, it feels close. Against a high-speed skiff refusing every warning, it becomes breathing room measured with a stopwatch. The captain gave the order. Final warning, all channels, loudspeaker. The radio operator transmitted first. Small craft, this is a United States Navy warship. You are approaching a protected military vessel. Turn away immediately or defensive measures will be taken. Then the destroyer's loudspeaker carried the same warning across the water, hard and unmistakable. Turn away now. The lead boat did not turn. At 5:38, the 2 trailing skiffs began to separate again. The northern boat slowed, then angled outward. The southern boat pushed wider, trying to stretch the destroyer's attention across multiple bearings. Inside CIC, the surface picture tightened. Outer contacts maneuvering. Lead remains primary. Southern contact opening angle. The captain answered without hesitation. Track all. Do not lose the lead. Above the scene, the MH-60R Seahawk held its orbit. Its sensor ball stayed locked on the lead skiff, recording faces, movement, equipment, course, speed, and every ignored warning. The Seahawk pilot came over the net. Lead craft shows no sign of compliance. That sentence moved through the ship like a door closing. On the starboard side, the defensive teams were ready. Not eager, ready. There is a difference. The crews had clear fields of view. Safety observers watched angles, distances, and background. Nobody wanted a mistake. Nobody wanted an unnecessary escalation. But nobody was going to let that skiff reach the hull. At 5:39, the destroyer made a controlled maneuver. Not a panic turn, not a retreat. A measured adjustment, just enough to change the approach geometry and deny the skiff the clean line it wanted. Thousands of tons of American steel responded smoothly under the helmsman's hands, pushing white water down the ship's side. The lead skiff reacted late. Its bow bounced hard across the chop, then shifted to correct. That correction told CIC everything. They're steering to maintain approach. The captain's voice remained flat. Understood. No speech followed, no dramatic countdown. The ship did not need one. Every layer was already awake. Radar held the track. Optics held the image. The Seahawk held overwatch. The defensive teams held the line. At 5:40, the destroyer's whistle blasted again, deeper than before, shaking across the water. Searchlights pinned the lead skiff in white glare. The Seahawk crossed behind it at a safe angle, rotor wash cutting the surface into broken rings. For the first time, the men in the lead boat looked uncertain. The man near the bow ducked lower. Another grabbed the side rail. The driver glanced over his shoulder at the trailing boats as if expecting them to be closer. They were not. The formation was breaking. The northern skiff had already lost speed. The southern skiff was too far wide to support the lead boat quickly. What had looked like a coordinated rush was turning into one boat alone in front of a destroyer that had tracked every move it made. At 5:41, the lead skiff crossed inside 1 nautical mile. CIC called it immediately. Lead contact inside 1 nautical mile, still inbound. The captain made his decision. Authorize defensive positioning, prepare warning measures, hold unless ordered. On the starboard side, the teams adjusted. The movement was precise, visible, and final. The kind of motion even men in a speeding skiff could understand. The Seahawk transmitted again, this time from overhead. Turn away immediately. You are being recorded. You are creating a hostile situation. The lead skiff held for 3 more seconds. 3 seconds can be nothing. 3 seconds can be history. Then the driver finally broke. The bow snapped right, hard, too hard. The skiff slammed across its own weight, throwing spray high over the men aboard. One stumbled against the cabin frame. Another grabbed the tarp near the stern as equipment shifted across the deck. No one on the destroyer cheered. There was no time. Lead contact turning away, CIC reported. Speed decreasing, course opening. Maintain track, the captain said, because one turn was not the end. One turn was only one turn. At 5:42, the northern skiff followed, cutting speed and peeling away from the destroyer's projected path. The southern skiff hesitated, then turned outward too, its wake curving wide across the gray water. The maneuver had failed, not because the men in the boats suddenly found better judgment, because the U.S. Navy had taken away every option they thought they had. No blind spot, no confusion, no soft target, no panic. Just a destroyer, a helicopter, a disciplined crew, and a shrinking circle of consequences. At 5:43, the lead skiff was no longer inbound. Range was opening. Speed had dropped below 20 knots. The captain watched the track for another moment. Keep the Seahawk on them. Prepare boarding team. The boats had turned away from the hull, but they were not simply leaving. Not after that approach. Not after those warnings. Not after forcing a U.S. Navy ship to the edge of defensive action. The immediate risk was breaking. The mission was not over. At 5:44 local time, the sea did not calm down. Only the skiffs did. The lead boat had turned away from the destroyer's starboard bow, its speed dropping fast as the driver fought the wake he had created for himself. The 2 outer boats peeled off behind him. No longer a formation, no longer a rush, no longer bold. Just 3 small craft under the eyes of a U.S. Navy warship. Above them, the MH-60R Seahawk stayed in orbit. Its camera did not blink. Inside CIC, the tracks were still live. Nobody cleared the situation just because the boats had turned. At sea, a retreat can be real. It can also be a trick. Bridge, CIC, lead contact opening range, speed 18 knots. Outer contact separating. The captain looked at the display. Maintain overwatch. Prepare RHIB team. That order shifted the destroyer into its next phase. The danger had moved from immediate approach to controlled interception. The skiffs had tried speed. Now they were going to meet procedure. On the starboard side, sailors prepared the rigid hull inflatable boat. The boarding team moved with practiced efficiency. Helmets, body armor, radios, medical kit, restraints, cameras. No wasted motion, no celebration, no speeches. This was not payback. This was control. At 5:46, the destroyer issued another command over the radio. Small craft, stop your engines. Remain visible. Keep your hands in sight. The lead skiff slowed further. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then its engine dropped to idle. The northern skiff followed. The southern skiff drifted wider, as if still considering one last bad idea. The Seahawk made sure it did not. The helicopter shifted position, sliding across the southern boat's path with enough distance to stay safe and enough presence to make the message obvious. Don't. At 5:47, the southern skiff finally reduced speed. Inside CIC, the surface watch marked all 3 contacts as compliant, but not secure. That distinction mattered. Compliant meant they had stopped moving. Secure meant they could no longer surprise you. They were not secure yet. At 5:48, the RHIB dropped into the water. The small Navy boat hit the surface hard, bounced once, then surged forward under power. 2 sailors covered the forward and rear arcs. The boarding officer sat low, eyes fixed on the lead skiff. The coxswain angled through the chop, keeping enough speed to command the approach, but not enough to create confusion. From above, the Seahawk watched the geometry. From the destroyer, cameras watched the hands. From the RHIB, the boarding team watched the faces. 3 layers, 1 problem. At 5:50, the RHIB came alongside the lead skiff. Hands visible, do not move. The men obeyed slowly. 6 were aboard, sweat-soaked, silent, young enough to look nervous, old enough to understand exactly what they had done. 1 kept glancing at the destroyer looming behind the RHIB, as if he was finally realizing the scale of his mistake. The boarding team climbed aboard, fast, controlled, professional. The driver was separated first. Another man was moved away from the stern. The others were ordered to sit where they could be seen. Every movement was recorded. Every object was left untouched until photographed. At 5:52, the search began. Under the tarp, the team found plastic fuel cans, heavy rope, metal hooks, and a collapsible ladder section. None of it looked dramatic by itself. Together, it told a very simple story. They had not been fishing. They had been closing on a military vessel with equipment suited for boarding. That is the thing about modern piracy. It rarely arrives with a flag and a confession. It arrives as speed, silence, and tools that suddenly make sense once the distance gets short. At 5:55, the second RHIB moved toward the northern skiff. The Seahawk stayed above the southern boat until everyone aboard was seated and visible. One by one, the boats were checked, photographed, and brought under control. No defensive shots used, no American injuries, no damage to the destroyer, and not one skiff got close enough to touch the hull. Inside the destroyer's CIC, the mood stayed quiet. The adrenaline was still there, but buried under work. Logs had to be completed, video had to be preserved, coordinates had to be verified. Times had to match radio transmissions. The difference between a clean operation and a messy one is paperwork nobody sees. The Navy sees it. That is why the system works. At 5:58, the captain received the update. Boarding team reports suspected piracy equipment recovered. Personnel secured. No injuries. He nodded once. Continue documentation. Keep the aircraft overhead until all boats are secure. Outside, dawn finally broke clean across the Gulf of Aden. The destroyer's gray hull cut through the water like nothing had happened. But something had happened. 3 skiffs had rushed a U.S. Navy warship at full speed. They had ignored repeated warnings, tried to divide the ship's attention, and pushed deep into the danger zone. They expected hesitation. They found radar. They expected panic. They found procedure. They expected a soft target. They found American steel, a Seahawk overhead, and a crew that understood exactly how far restraint could go before it had to become action. By 6:10, the skiffs were under control. The men were processed. The evidence was documented. The destroyer returned to course. No victory music, no shouting, no Hollywood ending. Just a line in the ship's log and 3 small boats that would not be rushing anything else that morning. So here is the question. If you were standing on that bridge watching 3 fast boats closing in after ignoring every warning, how long would you wait before taking the next step? Would you hold back until the last possible second, or would you act harder the moment they refused the first order? Drop your answer in the comments, because those boats came in thinking speed was power. The U.S. Navy reminded them that real power is what happens when discipline, sensors, aircraft, and steel all move as one.